Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Melissa. Let's get into it. Today we are talking about verifiable credentials. We are going to talk about what they are, what the protocol is, what they're composed of, the advantages of the process, and essentially how they work and then what they look like. And we're talking about this because in today's highly digital world, we have come to rely on digital copies of documents. We send and keep digital files to reduce paper waste and speed up transmission. We store photos on hard drives of the cloud so we don't have to print them out. And then those that are printed can always be duplicated if they get damaged. So it makes sense to be able to have these digital copies of credential documents too. These are the items of proof that verify who we are and are licensed to do what we do. We're old enough to get into a nightclub, or we've earned a particular degree. We could be identified internationally for travel. Those are just a few examples. Verifiable credentials allow for this digital copy to be stored and shared as needed, but in a way that protects privacy even better than physical copies do. So let's jump into what the verifiable credentials protocol is. So the World Wide Web Consortium, which oversees international standards for the internet, created the verifiable credentials protocol. And this goal was to make it possible to verify identity and credentials online, but in a way that is cryptographically secure and respects privacy. It is one of the three pillars of self-sovereign identity, along with the decentralized identifiers protocol and distributed ledger technology, which is also called blockchain. So these technologies work together to create a trustworthy and safe verification process that the ID holder has control of. A transparent record of use also keeps verifying entities accountable. So you might be wondering what these verifiable credentials are composed of. And the most obvious component of a verifiable credential is its claim. So for example, if the credential is your driver's license, it claims that you have completed requirements that are necessary to be able to drive. And along with that basic assertion is metadata, and that contains additional information. So who issued the credential and when, the expiration date, a photo, maybe a few other pieces of information, as well as a public key that would allow for verification. So ultimately, that credential holds proof of the claim. It verifies the source of the credential and that the license is still valid and hasn't been revoked, and that the data is authentic and has not been tampered with. Now let's talk about the advantages of this process, because you might be wondering, why is this necessary? As things are now, we need to show proof of a credential over the internet. We typically scan, we fax, we email the physical card or document. And soon enough, this is going to be very old school, and for a good reason. Your email can easily be hacked, and anyone who has a photocopy of your card has all the information on it that you do. And you also have no knowledge of who might have accessed it maliciously, and then no record of the legitimate parties who have gotten a copy over the years. With verifiable credentials, you have a record of when and where your information was shared. And then you're also able to revoke that relationship anytime you choose. And this really allows you to have a lot more control over your own information. You can pick and choose attributes that you want to disclose or keep private. So for example, you could prove your birth year without giving away the month and day, or vice versa. And there's also no danger of getting verifiable credentials lost, stolen, or damaged like we do with physical copies. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of how these verifiable credentials work in the first place. The elements of credentials that verifiers will access are stored on a tamper-proof ledger, or blockchain, in a decentralized database. So instead of going to the issuer itself, a verifying party will get that information through this cross-referenced blockchain. And what's most interesting is that the ledger doesn't actually store the data itself, but rather the signatures and attestations to it that are necessary for verification. So this capability is known as zero knowledge proof. And since the ledger is immutable, the information on it cannot be changed, and actual personal data shouldn't be stored on it. Different types of credentials have particular schemas that issuers or verifiers use to keep that process standardized. So I want to keep illuminating this process. So let's continue to talk about this example that I have with the driver's license. So the issuer, the DMV in this case, publishes its own decentralized identifier on the blockchain ledger, as well as a schema which outlines the information that's in a driver's license. So your name, your driver's license number, your address, those things. When the DMV issues your verifiable credential, you will hold it in your own wallet and control how much you want the verifiers to see. So in this example, let's say a police officer pulls you over and they want to see your driver's license. You can share just the digital signature, which verifies that you are allowed to drive. And that means that you aren't sharing the actual data or specific information on your driver's license. The officer wouldn't be able to see your address or birth date, but if your license expires, the DMV can publish that on the blockchain, and then the police would be able to see that update since it is relevant to your license to drive, which the officer does need to verify. So what does this look like? What does a verifiable credential look like? In terms of user visuals, it would look like cards in a digital wallet. They would be accessed through web or mobile versions, which would provide a simple and familiar type of experience. Their design can be customized. So, for example, by the administrators of a business that use them for employee verification. And let's say they want to reflect their company style and branding, you can completely customize that. At the end of the day, verifiable credentials are a modern, convenient, and secure way to store and use identifying documents. With capabilities that aren't possible in physical copies, they allow for that private and controlled verification, which you have a little bit more control over. So if you're interested in who designs these cards, I'll drop the link for you in the description of this podcast. I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit more about verifiable credentials and understand the value that they have.